Well, so how do you then, like, I'm wondering as a pastor, how do you go about creating a community of sex positivity within this space?
hmm Well, we have people in our church that are poly. We have people in our church that are monogamous. We have people in our church we have leaders in our church that are part of the LGBT community. I ordain weddings in the LGBT community.
Mhm.
I affirm sex positivity and in almost all of our teachings. One thing that for me I think is important in churches is to shut down values that make their way into that make that space unsafe.
Yeah.
We have a tendency in the church to say we want everybody to feel welcome, but the
Mm.
problem is when bigots are comfortable, then everyone's not safe.
Yeah. 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 That is a important distinction there too, because I mean, you can't just make it an inclusive space without it actually feeling like a welcoming space for
hmm
folks to actually be fully who they are.
hmm
As you say, the Six Flags churches, there was a series, I'm totally blanking on the name of it right now, but on HBO. Did you watch this? Do you know what I'm talking about? It
Mm.
had, oh my goodness. It was basically
Yeah,
they were
oh,
a family
I
church.
hmm
Um,
I didn't get to watch it yet, and you know what's funny is I forgot about it until you mentioned it. So now I have something to binge. So thank you for
yeah,
that.
the Righteous Gemstones. That's what it
Yep.
was. The Righteous
hmm
Gemstones. Yeah, and I think, I mean, part of me even wonders, how like churches feel about things like that being put out there when it feels, granted, again, I'm very distant from church communities and all of that, but that feels like it's not very far off of a representation of what some of those really high up pastors with the Bentleys and whatever, what the lifestyle is, where like they might be preaching these things on one end, but then on in their own life they're engaging in all of this sin, when again, because it is in alignment with white supremacy and with what is considered to be successful in our culture. I don't think they view it as a sin. um
Which,
I don't know.
again, from the Gospels, from the texts that are centric to the life of Jesus, Jesus was the most anti-billionaire, you
Hmm.
know, um,
Yeah.
activist that ever lived. I mean, one of the things that got Jesus crucified was turning over the tables of money changers because it was being taxed and benefiting Roman Empire. And Jesus was also known for teaching things like sell all your possessions and give it to the poor. And the early
Yeah.
church, for all intents and purposes, before Rome got its claws in it, was a communist community. They sold their possessions and they shared with each other to make sure they all had food, shelter, and basic
Yeah.
human needs. Yet the Christian nation in our world looks
Mm.
nothing like that.
Yeah. So I feel like it's safe to say then that Jesus would vote for Bernie.
Oh, absolutely. Bernie Sanders, one of the things that blew my mind was that on the right and even the mainline left church, that Bernie Sanders wasn't the top choice for people. I'm like, the person that we value, that we worship, was an activist that was teaching socialistic values, that
Hmm.
was brash and sometimes even a disruptor publicly
Yeah.
of cultural normatives. And yet, the person that I've seen that looks most like him ethically
Hmm.
was not top of the list.
Yeah.
And that shocks me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm happy that we don't have Trump anymore, but I was shocked that Bernie wasn't the top choice for most people.
Yeah. Well, because he goes against those things that all of these people benefit from, of the
hmm
greed, of the capitalism, of being able to exploit other people and having that ritualistic complacency. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah. And you do so the opposite of that, it sounds like, with your church. You have
We do.
a brewery.
We
Can
do.
you can you talk on that?
Well, like people often hear about our brewery and they're like, this is new and it's radical. And it's not actually. In European countries, churches have had breweries. Monks have been brewing beer for centuries. You may have heard of the beer Chimay. You may have seen it on tap in some
I don't
places.
I
And
don't drink anything. So
Okay. Well,
I'm the wrong person to ask in that area. But yes.
If you have beer enthusiasts that listen, they may have seen Chimay on tap anywhere, and they may just think it's a Belgian style beer, but it's actually brewed by monks, and all the money goes to orphanages. So I used to joke when people would come over, I'd always have a 6-pack of it in my fridge, and they were like, "What's this?" I'm like, "It's my tithe." I'm like, because it goes to orphanages. So we had this big building that sat like 500 people, and we would at most have like 80 or 90 because we were relaunching a new progressive church out of this existing community. And even when we were, at our max of a couple hundred for Easter, the room still felt like empty because it was so big. It was built in the 60s when everything was closed on Sunday, so everybody just went to church. It was part of culture. And what ended up happening is the maintenance of the place was just so expensive, we couldn't really do as much good in the community as we wanted to. It was taking away funding from things that we were passionate about, like other nonprofits. So what we decided to do was sell that property and take the money and build a brewery where 30 to 60% of the profits will go to local charities like the NAACP, like the Homeless Garden Project, like Planned Parenthood, and local environmental organizations, and organizations that support LGBTQ citizens and LGBT youth. Because that's what we did on Sunday anyway. Most of our congregants just couldn't afford to donate. But what they do is they will go out to eat or have a drink with their friends. So if we can create a space, in my mind, where people don't have to choose between leisure and charity, because right now, as unjust of an economic state as we have in this country is, they do have to make that choice.
Yeah.
They have to choose between staying sane from working 3 jobs and maybe going to have a drink with their friends and donating $20 to an organization they're passionate about. If we can eliminate that decision and they can accomplish both in the same place, then I think we'll do some good for the community. So we started the Greater Purpose Brewing Company. Our church is Greater Purpose Community Church. We sold our building, opened Greater Purpose Brewing Company, and it's in Santa Cruz, California. And 30 to 60% of profits will go to those local charities. And even though we're in the red right now because of the pandemic and we have seating regulations and things like that, we're still donating at least $200 a month to each organization, even though we're not profitable. But once that changes, we're hopefully 60 to 80% is kind of my target margin of what I would like to see.
Yeah. I mean, that does make a ton of sense. And I think, even just when I think about like growing up, like donating our money, that was not like, especially, my mom was a single mom, like there is not a huge emphasis in our culture on actually donating our money. And I think in large part because there is such inequality when it comes to wealth. And also because within our system of white supremacy, there is a dehumanizing of folks who do not meet those standards, who are in need of help. And in fact, oftentimes the people who are in need of help are being exploited, and the people who could be giving them that help and donating that money are benefiting from the fact that those people need help. So it's just so backwards, but I think so many people do, even working class folks, have to, make that intentional thought of like, oh yeah, I should donate some of my money, even though I'm stressed about paying for this and paying for that and trying to like, have success for myself. Like, honestly, I think after summer 2020, there is more of an emphasis culturally for folks, I guess just maybe the white people who are now aware of racism, to have that thought. But it's really not I don't think it's that important for most people to donate and share that wealth and have that kind of just having the importance and the connection to donating, even just within your community. I mean, I look at the farmers market like that. Like that's me engaging with my community.
Absolutely.
But we're so So
It,
disconnected.
it's so disconnected. And I think, one of the things that happens in church is there's this guilt trip that's being placed on people that
Oh
are
yeah.
impoverished, that you should tithe and then God will bless you. And
Ugh.
then people are so desperate to get out of poverty. They're like, take my money, even though it's going to cause my family to suffer more, take this money, and they give it to the church, and then nothing happens. And then that certainly doesn't help with their mental state either, right? Like, so it's a really bad praxis. It's not an orthodoxy, but it is an orthopraxis in the church. And I think for me, one of the most important things that we did, even when we had a building, was eliminate tithing. Like, we would take donations for organizations on Sunday mornings, like Planned Parenthood, like the Diversity Center, like the NAACP and other nonprofits, but we gave 100% of it out. And we did that for two reasons. One, because if people want to give in excess, we want them to give to social justice initiatives because we believe that's biblically based. And we had other means of surviving as a church. We rented our facility out as a community center. So that's how we paid the bills. But as far as charity was concerned, we want people to donate to the causes that are doing the work. That was number one. Number two, the problem is that people that can really afford to give 10% of their income are rich people of privilege, usually. And if you look at the biggest, most successful churches in this country, they're usually funded by rich people of privilege. And the one thing that all of those churches have in common is they all teach the same theological filth of Republican Christianity and, this Republican MAGA Jesus, that most of them were Trump supporting and things like that, because that's what the pastor was expected to teach because he was funded by people that had those ideals. So what I can do now that I don't take tithes and offerings, if you come in as a, MAGA style Christian, is I can say, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. And there's no pressure for me to be worried about staff or how we're going to pay bills or any of that. So I can speak ethical truth without being weighed down by conservative expectation.
Burn it all down.
I'm with you.
Hate it. I hate it.
Me too.
I hate it all.
And I work for Jesus.
Yeah. Where I know you mentioned kind of like the names of the brewery, where you're located. Where else can people kind of find you to hear more about either like how to get involved with what you're doing, how to listen to you speak more? Where are the places that people can find you?
So if you're a reader, I wrote a book called Reborn Again, Crucifying Christendom and Resurrecting a Radical. And it's kind of the story of my transition from being a conservative evangelical Christian, because contrary to how I'm talking right now, I are in the past one of those bigoted evangelical Christians. I was the worst of them, and I came out of that. So the whole book is about a journey that's an exodus from evangelical theology. So if you want to read that and, kind of dive into a little bit more of the historical reasoning for my transition and the biblical reasoning for my transition, there's that. It's available. It's available online. Just Google it. And then if you want to listen to our sermons, we have a live stream on Sundays. It's on YouTube Live. You can look up Greater Purpose Community Church and participate there. But if you're into the podcast, which I'm assuming most of your listeners are, we have a podcast of the sermons. And if you look up Rev'd up Theolitics, so it's kind of like a blend of theology and politics, you can find our sermons on a weekly basis and listen there. And input welcome.
Yeah.
Would love to hear people's thoughts and
Well, you did
continue the
an episode
conversation.
you did an episode on purity culture as well there.
I did.
Yeah.
I sure did. I've done a few. In fact, we're talking about the harmful nature of hope this week and how hope often encourages people to sit in complicity this week.
Yep.
So kind of expounds on what we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I'm like, I could go on and on. I got so many more questions and points here. But thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of this. This has been great.
It has been awesome. Thank you so much. And I look forward to having more conversations with you. And if you're ever in the area, stop on by. I know you don't drink, but we've got kombucha. I got one on me for you.
I love me some good kombucha. Thank you.
We got that too. Take it easy.
And now, may the revolution of Jesus go with you wherever it may send you. May it guide you in healing this wasteland and protect you through the storm. May it lead you through this world seeking the justice it demands for you and for others. And may it bring you home preparing to continue love's mission beyond your doors. Grace and justice to you.